When I speak to you about recognizing the signs of the Holy Spirit in your life, I want to begin with something very simple, yet something that often goes unnoticed in its quiet strength. There is a kind of peace that does not behave like the peace of this world. It does not depend on whether everything is going well. It does not rise and fall with your circumstances. Instead, it remains steady even when everything around you seems uncertain, even when your heart has every reason to be afraid. There are moments in life when you may find yourself standing in the middle of confusion. The answer you were waiting for has not arrived. The situation you hoped would change is still the same. The door you expected to open remains closed. And yet, deep within you, something is different. You cannot explain it easily, but you are not as shaken as you think you should be. There is a calmness that settles over your spirit, not because you understand everything, but because something within you is holding you steady. That is where many people begin to recognize the gentle work of the Holy Spirit. It is not loud, it does not force itself upon you, it does not create confusion or panic. Instead, it brings a quiet assurance, a stillness that says, you are not alone in this. Even in the midst of unanswered questions, there is a sense that your life is still held by a greater hand, and that recognition alone begins to soften fear. You may be walking through a season where the pressure is real. Responsibilities weigh on you, decisions feel heavy, the future seems unclear. Yet, in prayer or even in silence, you find that your heart is not completely overwhelmed. You may still feel concern, but not despair. You may still feel the challenge, but not abandonment. Something is anchoring you from within, and that anchor is deeper than human emotion. It is spiritual in nature, steadying you when everything else is unstable. This peace often comes unexpectedly. It does not always arrive when you are strong. Many times it comes when you are at your weakest, when you have exhausted your own reasoning, when you have gone as far as your understanding can take you. That is often when this quiet assurance begins to rise. And it does not demand attention. It simply rests there, reminding you that there is more happening in your life than what your eyes can see. You begin to notice that your reactions change. The same situation that once would have made you panic now meets a different response. You may still care deeply, but you are no longer consumed. You may still be waiting, but you are no longer tormented by the waiting. Something has shifted inside you, and that shift is not something you manufactured. It feels given, not created. And in that stillness, there is guidance. Not always in words, not always in dramatic moments, but in a quiet knowing that you are being carried through what you cannot control. The Holy Spirit does not always remove the storm immediately, but often brings peace within the storm itself. That distinction is important, because it teaches you that divine presence is not only proven by changing your environment, but also by stabilizing your heart within it. There is a sacredness in that kind of peace. It protects you from being completely overwhelmed. It keeps your spirit from breaking under pressure. It allows you to breathe when everything around you tells you there is no reason to breathe calmly. And slowly, you begin to trust it more than your fear. You begin to recognize it as a familiar voice in your inner life, one that does not accuse, does not rush, but simply steadies you. And when you reflect on it, you realize something powerful. If you are able to remain inwardly anchored in situations that should have undone you, then you are not walking through those situations alone. There is a presence working within you, shaping your response, strengthening your inner life, and reminding you that peace is still possible even here. So when everything around you feels uncertain, pay attention not only to what is happening outside of you, but to what is happening within you. Because sometimes the clearest sign that you are being led by the Holy Spirit is not the removal of the storm, but the unexplainable calm He places in the middle of it. And in that calm you are being held. There is something very tender and very sacred that begins to happen in the inner life of a person when the Holy Spirit is at work. It is not always dramatic. It does not always come with outward signs that others can easily recognize. But within your own heart, you begin to notice something shifting. There is a quiet sensitivity that begins to grow, a gentle awareness that distinguishes between what brings you closer to light and what pulls you away from it. It is not a voice that condemns you. It is not a harsh accusation that leaves you feeling worthless or ashamed. Rather, it is something far more gentle yet deeply powerful. It is an inner conviction that simply lets you know this is not the direction you were created to walk in. And in that moment, there is a turning that begins to take place inside you, not by force, but by awareness. You may find yourself in situations where something once seemed acceptable, or at least easily ignored, and yet now it does not sit comfortably within your spirit. There is a discomfort, not because someone has told you it is wrong, but because something within you has become more sensitive to truth. That sensitivity is not something you manufactured through effort alone. It is something that grows as your inner life becomes more attuned to a higher presence working within you. And what is beautiful about this conviction is that it does not push you away from hope. It draws you toward correction with the promise of restoration. You are not left in despair. You are not abandoned in guilt. Instead, there is a gentle pull toward realignment, toward returning to a place where your heart feels clean, open, and at peace again. It is as if your spirit recognizes when it has drifted and softly calls you back. There are moments when you may even surprise yourself. You pause before saying something you would have said before without hesitation. You step back from choices that once felt normal. You reconsider paths that once seemed harmless. And in those moments, there is an inner awareness that something has changed within you. It is not fear driving you. It is not pressure from the outside. It is a quiet inner guidance that is reshaping your direction. This kind of conviction is one of the most merciful signs of the Holy Spirit at work in a life, because it means you are not being left to drift without awareness. It means your heart is still responsive. It means your spirit is still sensitive. A hardened heart does not feel such things easily. But a heart that is being shaped, softened, and awakened begins to recognize even the smallest nudges of truth. And you will notice something else as well. The more you respond to that gentle conviction, the clearer it becomes. It is not meant to punish you. It is meant to refine you. It is not meant to break your spirit. It is meant to guide it. And over time, you begin to realize that this inner awareness is protecting you from choices that would ultimately steal your peace. There is a certain dignity that comes with this kind of spiritual awareness. You begin to value what is right, not out of obligation, but out of love for what is pure and life-giving. You begin to walk more carefully, not because you are afraid of making mistakes, but because you no longer want to ignore the quiet voice that leads you towards something better. And even when you do stumble, that same gentle conviction does not destroy you. It restores you. It calls you back without humiliation. It reminds you that you are not beyond correction, and you are not beyond growth. There is still a path forward, still a way to return, still a mercy that meets you where you are. In this way, your inner life becomes more awake, more responsive, more alive. You are no longer walking blindly through decisions, but listening more carefully to the movements within your spirit. And as that sensitivity grows, so does your awareness that you are being led, shaped, and gently guided by a presence that cares not only about where you are, but about who you are becoming. And in that sacred awareness, your heart learns to choose the light again and again. There is a beautiful and unmistakable sign that begins to appear in a life that is being touched by the Holy Spirit. And it is something you cannot easily imitate or force. It is a growing desire, a quiet but steady pull within your heart, drawing you into prayer, into stillness, into moments where you are no longer satisfied with only outward activity, but you begin to long for inward communion. At first, it may seem subtle. You may not even recognize it as something spiritual. You simply notice that your heart is turning more often toward reflection. In moments when you once would have filled the silence with noise, you now find yourself drawn to stillness. In moments when you once would have distracted yourself, you now feel a gentle inclination to pause and be alone in thought, in prayer, in conversation with God. It is not forced. It is not mechanical. It is something that begins to rise naturally from within. There is something deeply personal about this change. It is not about obligation. It is not about religious routine. It is about relationship. And when the Holy Spirit begins to move in a life, prayer is no longer seen as a duty to perform, but as a place of refuge, a place of connection, a place where your spirit finds rest. You begin to discover that you are not just speaking words upward, but you are entering into a deeper awareness of presence, guidance, and nearness. And what is so remarkable is that this desire often grows in seasons when life is not necessarily easy. You may find yourself praying more not because everything is going well, but because something within you knows that you cannot walk through life on your own understanding alone. There is a dependence that begins to form, a quiet recognition that strength is not only found in your ability to manage things, but in your willingness to seek help beyond yourself. There are moments when you may not even have the right words, yet you still find yourself drawn into prayer. It becomes less about speaking perfectly and more about simply being honest. Sometimes it is silence, sometimes it is tears. Sometimes it is just a deep awareness of needing something greater than what you can produce in your own strength. And in those moments, something sacred begins to happen within you. You are no longer standing at a distance. You are entering into communion. And you will notice something else as well. The more you respond to that inner pull, the more natural it becomes. What once felt like effort begins to feel like necessity. What once felt like discipline begins to feel like life. You begin to realize that your spirit does not thrive on constant distraction, but on connection. And in that connection, there is nourishment that nothing else can replace. There is also a shift in how you carry your burdens. Things that once felt too heavy to even speak about begin to find their way into prayer. Concerns, fears, questions, even hopes that you were unsure how to express begin to rise within you. And instead of carrying them alone, you begin to release them in that sacred space of conversation with God. It is not that the weight disappears immediately, but you are no longer carrying it in isolation. Something within you is sharing the load. And in this growing desire for prayer, there is also growth in awareness. You begin to notice answers not always in dramatic ways, but in quiet reassurance. You begin to sense direction not always in loud instructions, but in subtle clarity. You begin to feel strengthened not always through changed circumstances, but through changed inner strength. And all of this flows from that simple but powerful turning of your heart toward communion. It is important to understand that this desire is not something you can manufacture by willpower alone. It is not simply about scheduling more time or performing more rituals. It is something deeper. It is a response of the human spirit to the drawing of something divine. And when that drawing is present, even the smallest moments of prayer begin to carry weight and meaning far beyond their length. You may find yourself speaking less and listening more. You may find yourself becoming more aware of quiet impressions, gentle promptings, and inner reassurance. And over time, your entire inner life begins to shift. Prayer is no longer something you turn to only in crisis, but something that becomes part of your ongoing awareness, your ongoing relationship, your ongoing walk. And in that sacred unfolding, you realize something very profound. The Holy Spirit is not only guiding your outward steps, but is drawing your heart inward, closer, and deeper into the presence where your spirit finally learns to rest. One of the most undeniable ways you begin to recognize the work of the Holy Spirit in a life is through transformation. And I am not speaking about a sudden change that happens in appearance alone, or a change that is only visible on the surface. I am speaking about something far deeper, something that begins quietly within the heart and slowly becomes visible in the way you think, the way you respond, and the way you live. You may not even notice it at first. Change in the human spirit is often gradual, almost like a seed that begins to grow underground before anything is seen above the surface. But over time, you begin to realize that you are not the same person you used to be. Your reactions are different. Your desires are different. Your patience is different. And even your understanding of yourself begins to shift. There are moments when you would have responded with anger, but now you find a pause where there used to be impulse. There are situations that once would have led you into frustration or bitterness, but now there is a quiet restraint, a sense of calm that steps in before your emotions take control. And you begin to wonder where this strength is coming from, because you know it is not something you have always been able to do on your own. This is where transformation reveals itself as a sign of something greater at work within you. It is not forced behavior modification. It is not self-improvement in the natural sense. It is an inward shaping, a gentle refining of the heart. And as this work continues, you begin to notice that your values are changing. What once seemed important begins to lose its grip. What once felt necessary begins to feel less significant compared to the deeper things stirring within your spirit. You also begin to notice that your capacity for kindness increases. There is a softness that begins to grow where hardness once existed. People who once would have easily irritated you no longer have the same power over your peace. Instead, there is a growing ability to understand, to listen, to extend grace even when it is not expected. And this is not something you are manufacturing through effort alone. It feels as though something within you is being reshaped at the very core. And one of the most beautiful signs of this transformation is the increase in forgiveness. You begin to release things that you once held tightly. Old hurts that once defined your emotions begin to lose their authority over you. You may still remember them, but they no longer control your responses. There is a loosening, a freeing, a gentle release that allows you to move forward without being bound to the weight of the past. You also begin to see change in your desires. The things that once attracted your attention so strongly begin to fade in importance. Instead, there is a growing hunger for what is pure, what is meaningful, what brings peace rather than chaos. And you begin to realize that your inner appetite is changing. It is not just about avoiding what is wrong, but about desiring what is right. That shift is deeply significant because it shows that transformation is happening at the level of the heart, not just behavior. And sometimes this transformation is confirmed by others before you even fully recognize it yourself. People may begin to say that you are different, calmer, more patient, more grounded. And while you may not always feel the full extent of that change, there is an awareness that something is indeed happening within you. But the most important recognition is not external. It is internal. It is the quiet realization that you are not who you once were. There is also a growing strength in your ability to resist what once easily pulled you away. Things that once had influence over your choices begin to lose their hold. Not because you are trying harder in your own strength, but because something deeper within you is strengthening your resistance. There is a new awareness, a new sensitivity, and a new alignment forming within your spirit. And as this transformation continues, you begin to understand that it is not perfection that defines the process, but direction. You are moving, you are growing, you are being shaped. And even in moments of imperfection, there is still evidence of progress, still evidence that something within you is alive and being worked upon. This is the quiet evidence of a life touched by the Holy Spirit. Not instant perfection, but steady transformation. Not outward appearance alone, but inward renewal. Not forced change, but living growth from within. And in that unfolding transformation, your life begins to reflect a light that was not there before, a light that bears witness to something far greater at work within you. There comes a time in a life that is being touched by the Holy Spirit when you begin to notice something very sacred unfolding within you, and it is this, a growing sense of guidance, a quiet clarity that begins to appear in places where confusion once ruled. It is not always loud, it is not always immediate, but it is steady, and it becomes more recognizable as you begin to trust it. There are moments when you stand before decisions that once would have overwhelmed you. You would have turned them over again and again in your mind, searching for answers, trying to force certainty out of uncertainty. But now, something is different. There is a stillness that begins to settle within you, and in that stillness, direction begins to emerge. It is not always explained in words. It is more like an inner knowing, a quiet assurance that gently points you forward. And you must understand, this kind of guidance does not always remove all questions immediately. Sometimes you still see only part of the path. Sometimes you still feel the weight of not knowing everything. But there is a shift in how you carry that uncertainty. Instead of being consumed by it, you begin to walk with it more peacefully. There is a trust forming within you that says, even if I do not see everything, I am not being led blindly. You begin to notice that confusion does not dominate you the way it once did. Where there used to be mental noise, there is now moments of quiet clarity. Where there used to be anxiety-driven decision-making, there is now a sense of calm observation before action. It is as though something within you is slowing you down just enough to see more clearly, to feel more deeply, and to discern more accurately. And sometimes this guidance comes through a deep sense of restraint. You may feel an inward hesitation towards something that on the surface appears acceptable. You may sense a gentle pulling away from a direction that others might easily step into. And it is not fear that is guiding you, it is discernment. It is a quiet awareness that not every open door is meant to be walked through, and not every opportunity aligns with your deeper purpose. There are also times when clarity comes unexpectedly. You may have been wrestling with a decision for days, even weeks, and then suddenly in a moment of stillness, something becomes clear. Not because all external circumstances have changed, but because something within you has settled. The noise has quieted enough for you to see what was already being revealed gently all along. And what is so important to understand is that this kind of guidance builds trust over time. At first you may question it. You may wonder whether it is your own thoughts or something deeper. But as you begin to act on that inner clarity and see how it leads you into peace rather than confusion, into alignment rather than regret, your confidence in that guidance begins to grow. You also begin to notice that your decisions carry less inner conflict. Even when they are not easy decisions, there is a sense of rightness within you that steadies your steps. You may still have to face challenges, but you are no longer internally divided in the same way. There is a unity forming between your inner awareness and your outward choices. And there is something deeply comforting about that, because it means you are not walking through life entirely dependent on your own limited understanding. There is a higher guidance at work, shaping your steps, aligning your path, and quietly directing you toward what you may not yet fully understand, but are being led to trust. There are also moments when that guidance protects you without you even realizing it at the time. You may later look back and recognize that what felt like hesitation or delay was actually preservation. What felt like a closed door was actually direction. What felt like uncertainty was actually guidance keeping you from paths that would not have served your growth or peace. And over time you begin to value this inner clarity more than external opinions. Not because you reject wisdom from others, but because you recognize that there is a deeper alignment being formed within you. You begin to weigh things differently. You begin to listen more carefully to what brings peace versus what only brings excitement or pressure. This is how guidance becomes more than a momentary experience. It becomes a way of walking, a way of discerning, a way of living in awareness that you are not navigating life alone, but are being gently led step by step, even when the full picture is not yet visible. And in that quiet unfolding, you realize something profound. Clarity does not always come from seeing everything at once, but from trusting the one who is guiding you through each step. There is another sign that becomes unmistakable in a life touched by the Holy Spirit, and it is something that cannot be manufactured, cannot be forced, and cannot be sustained by mere human effort alone. It is a deepening love and compassion for others, even for those who may not always be easy to love. And when this begins to take root within you, you begin to realize that something far greater than natural emotion is shaping your heart. There is a change in how you see people. Where once you may have been quick to judge, quick to form conclusions, quick to step back and distance yourself, now there is a different response beginning to rise within you. It is not that you suddenly ignore truth or pretend that wrong does not exist, but there is a softness forming, a willingness to understand before condemning, a desire to see beyond the surface of a person's behavior and recognize the deeper story that may be hidden within. You begin to notice that your heart is less rigid. People who once would have easily provoked irritation in you no longer hold the same power over your emotions. Instead, there is a growing patience, a quiet restraint, a willingness to pause before reacting. And in that pause, something beautiful begins to happen. Compassion begins to rise where frustration once dominated. There is also a growing awareness that every person carries something unseen. You begin to realize that behind every expression, every action, every mistake, there is a human being with struggles, wounds, and battles that are not always visible on the surface. And this awareness begins to soften your approach. You are no longer only responding to what you see, but to what you sense may be hidden beneath it. And this compassion is not weak. It is not passive. It is strong, but it is gentle strength. It allows you to stand in truth without losing love. It allows you to speak honestly without losing kindness. It allows you to maintain boundaries without losing humanity. And this balance is something that does not come naturally to the untransformed heart. It is shaped within you through a deeper work taking place inside. You also begin to feel a desire to help rather than to withdraw. Where once you may have avoided difficult people or challenging situations, now there is a growing willingness to engage with grace. Not because it is easy, but because something within you no longer allows you to remain indifferent. There is a stirring within your spirit that says, do not turn away so quickly. There is still value here. There is still hope here. And perhaps one of the most powerful signs is that forgiveness becomes more accessible. Not because offense no longer hurts, but because love begins to outweigh the need to hold on to hurt. You begin to release things that once would have stayed in your heart much longer. You begin to let go not because you forget, but because you are learning that freedom is greater than resentment. There is also a growing sense that your life is not just for yourself alone. You begin to see that you are part of something larger, that your words, your actions, your responses have an impact beyond your immediate situation. And with that awareness comes responsibility, but also a deeper desire to be a source of encouragement rather than harm, healing rather than division. And in this unfolding compassion, you may find yourself surprised by your own responses. You may find yourself praying for people you once struggled to understand. You may find yourself wishing well for those who once caused you difficulty. And you may even find yourself experiencing a quiet sorrow when you see others hurting, even when their pain does not directly affect you. This is not something you can easily explain in human terms. It is not simply personality change or emotional development. It is something deeper, something spiritual in nature, where the boundaries of self-centeredness begin to loosen, and the heart begins to expand in ways it could not on its own. And as this love grows, something else begins to happen. Your presence begins to carry a different tone. People begin to feel a sense of ease around you that was not there before. Not because you have become perfect, but because something within you has become softer, more open, more reflective of grace. And slowly you begin to understand that this compassion is not your own achievement. It is the fruit of something working within you, shaping you into someone who can love beyond convenience, forgive beyond expectation, and care beyond personal gain. And in that growing love for others, you begin to see the clearest reflection that the Holy Spirit is truly at work within you, transforming not only how you live but how you love.